So the fact of the matter is that growth and development are severely skewed because right now it's favoring the developed world and those who are already affluent. The opportunity gap, therefore, continues to widen, which means that this is pushing marginalized communities further and further away from growth and development, from access to basic facilities and the fundamental rights that every human being must have and access to. And this glaring disparity, it's all around because our world now has more refugees than ever before. I spent last Christmas in Kutupalong, which is a small hamlet on the border of Bangladesh. Kutupalong houses the world's largest refugee camp and is home to more than 1.3 million Rohingya refugees, with hundreds every day joining this already overflowing sea of humanity. And I had seen images of their misery on television, but the ground reality is far worse in absolutely nightmarish as can ever truly describe. You have 50 babies that are born every day, but most of them do not survive beyond their first week. Abuse, exploitation, trafficking, these add to the pangs of hunger and disease at every moment. You have girls younger than 14 who are married up to men in their 60s just to escape from this life. You have all these people living in cramped conditions, in severely cramped conditions actually, because they live in about 30,000 ramshackle huts and plastic structures in just this small hilly terrain. And instead of roads, you have filthy mud-laden tracks. And basically, sanitation and hygiene do not exist. But if you look outside this camp, it's a completely different story. So the town is called Cox's Bazar, and it has a modern airport with several flights every day. You have new tarred roads that lead out of town and take you to Kutupalong, the refugee camp, in about an hour. And if one looks at this town, one gets the sense of growth and infrastructure development because they see modern amenities, hotels that are buzzing with tourists who have come to see the famed beach, which is reputed to be the longest natural beach in the world. Now, if you look at this region solely from a macro level with growth, development, infrastructure as its driver, then you will get a resounding affirmative because infrastructure development is there and there has been a lot of development. But then what about the refugees who are living outside this town who don't have access to these modern amenities? The political strife and complexities that created this situation, they can be blamed for the situation, of course, but the fact of the matter is that there are still 1 million people who do not have access, who are denied access to this infrastructure development despite living just an hour away from this modern town. Are marginalized that society does not deem as mainstream and thus pushing them further down the ladder. And I think that we all need to remind ourselves continuously of the fundamental definition of sustainability, because we need that balance amongst all its three pillars, where economic progress, in which infrastructure development definitely plays a key role, needs to be inclusive of all sections of society, and for a short time just be skewed in the favor of the marginalized communities, and at the same time ensure that environmental protection and regeneration remains a priority. We're nearing the end of the 4th year of the SDGs, and if we don't undergo, of course, correction right now, then Agenda 2030, SDG 8, and the dream of leaving no one behind, that will continue to be a dream. So in order to achieve this sustainable future through infrastructure development, we cannot leave anyone behind. And leaving behind these marginalized communities, that is the worst mistake that any of us can make. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll now have, how do you pronounce your last name? Peña. And Carlos Mendieta. Is he here? Well, okay. So if you will come. And they are going to discuss innovation models for work and living wages. Thank you.
Can I have
The clicker?
Right here.
There we go.
Well, thank you, the United States Sustainable Development Report, for organizing the event. My name is Alejandra. I don't know if you can hear me back there. Yes, I'm from Mexico, Mexico City, but I live in Guadalajara City. And do you mind putting our presentation,
Absolutely. I don't know. Oh, I forgot that.
We have heard already a lot about
What is the name of
data,
yours?
human rights, and we are all concerned about economic growth.
What is the name of
And how
yours?
to leave no one behind. I'm really concerned
Which
about
one
how
is it?
we are really,
This one?
leaving no one behind. No, it seems that economy is spreading out. Economy is spreading out, and how
This
to
one?
find new ways or new
No, that's next.
ideas to really try to tackle the marginalized, most marginalized population.
I'm not sure what the name of yours is. Did you
It's this
down-
one here.
This presentation?
Presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
it's a PDF?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So I won't talk about exactly the organization work. I'm going to talk about the alliances and how we are getting bigger and scaling up to leave really no one behind.
So it's a PDF,
Yes.
so I'm not sure how we're, just have to scroll. No, I'm saying that's the part that wasn't working before.
Page down.
Yeah, no, yes, it's not going to show there, is
Not
what I'm
showing
saying.
It's
Yeah.
not showing there?
No,
How
we could, I don't know, the same reason we couldn't get the Skype to work, I guess.
Uh-huh.
It was not
The
switching
PowerPoint
over.
is in
Yeah, I have
presentation mode.
With this,
The PowerPoint is in presentation mode that you can show.
So let's,
PowerPoint.
so,
Sorry.
That's
previous,
okay.
The previous PowerPoint.
let's take it off.
I don't know where it is.
Let's, it's not there.
It's not there.
No.
That is
No, it's not there. Yeah, I don't know why it wouldn't.
it's some button. Somehow the projective focus needs to move to the windows, not the background.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to do that.
The PowerPoint will come up, but the
The
PDF
PowerPoint?
won't.
PowerPoint
The
is
PDF
smart
or
about
the
that,
thing.
but these others don't have
Okay,
the.
here, try the PowerPoint.
Okay,
Oh. Oh.
It's in my computer.
okay. So, let,
Please.
yes. There we go. There. There we go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Excellent.
I
Thank
switched to reading.
Okay.
No, this tree is not there.
No.
Okay, sorry about that. reframing. My name is Alejandra. I come from Mexico. We are an ECOSOC status since 2015, or an NGO. And we are working with innovation models for work and living wages, a circular economy model of intervention. This is our presentation.
Is it here? No, that's hers. There.
And let's put some names, please, on the people we work with. Because sometimes we just don't see, I'm sorry, thank you. Sometimes we just don't see who they are. And we are really targeting people. So I want to address who we are working with. It's most of them are garbage pickers throughout the communities. They lack infrastructure. Sometimes they have never been to school, or they don't even have a registration certificate or a birth certificate. So we have 3 programs. The program on the left is the program which I called My Development. The one program develops skills for life, life basic skills and decision making. The second program is where the little girl is doing this. This is the first day that she got her birth certificate, and she's 5 years old. This is the first day she comes to school, and she belongs to the country, imagine. And the third, this is my right program. And the third program is called My Family Program, where we go through each house and work for 5 years with every family, twice a month, for skill parenting development. And this is a key factor for us to bring 5-year transformation program, where they start and they end with the participation 10% at the beginning, and then 90% of participation at the end. That's where we graduate them. That's where we say, you have the skills, you have the empowerment to go ahead and do whatever is your plan. We also have how to replicate technology. With technology, we have set in place a quality-based program and a virtual training program for other cells that we can combine, or how we can grow. And the key factors to ensure our decent work for the families that we work with, obviously not the children, but the families, is a systemic approach with the families, the children, and the youth. Skill development in non-formal sectors is a crucial and key factor. Ensure the human rights, their basic registration, going to school for the first time, etc. Empowerment to make really assurance that we do this. Include technology and training platforms to scale, and alliances. And this is where I'm going to give Carlos Mendieta, his sustainable development director from PetStar, our alliance that we found like, and we formed this alliance to make growth in the community and garbage sector, in garbage situations. And I think it's going to be quite interesting. If I would be talking about education, I would only be talking about Mayama. But since we are talking about economic growth, I asked him to come and give him his, from his side, why is PetStar investing so much in the children, in the families that we work with? Okay? So I'm going to give him the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandra. Thanks for this opportunity to share with you some lessons that we have learned through this alliance. And first of all, I have to say that something great happens today in New York. You know, talking about equality, which is the hashtag equal pay.
That's right.
Equal pay. No. So that's not only for women in sports; it's for all the activities. And we have to be part of that. We have to recover that passion to work in our communities. Now we are sharing great moments here in New York during this event. But we have to go back and work with that passion that sport teaches. PetStar is a company that collects and recycles PET bottles in order to produce recycled resin that we use again to produce more bottles. So we are in that circular economy. PetStar was launched by Jaime Camara 25 years ago. First of all, we only collect material and sell it. And now, 10 years ago, we closed the circle. We have the largest food-grade PET recycled resin worldwide. It's in Mexico, so you are welcome. Please visit us. It's very interesting. When you talk about recycling, in South countries, it's common, the idea that everything begins on landfills. And despite, although still this is a reality, 10 years ago, this is changing very quickly because the material is not anymore in the landfill. It's in the street. So the people, waste pickers, in Mexico we call them pepenadores, but scavengers, they have moved to the street, closer to the source, to us. And something happened, an informal system arises, which include some small deposits, small places where people can carry all solid waste and sell to the owner of that small deposit or just give it. And it's increasing, and increasing. And there's less people on landfills, and that's great because the hazardous conditions are there. So we have to empower that system, and that's the thing that PetStar is doing thanks to the alliance with another civil society organizations that, like Mayama, because we work in our supply chain, but we need to attend all the areas. So we have this alliance with Mayama to work with children, son of waste pickers that are part of our supply chain, and we develop social programs to them. So we take them from the informality to the formal role through our PetStar inclusive collecting model. And we also have a sustainable business model fully aligned with the circular economy. This year we received the cradle-to-cradle certification. It's very hard, but we made it. And I don't want to end without saying this. Talking about this is our system, our general system. It's not necessary, but we can see this is our PetStar inclusive collecting model. We have 10 areas with a social, environmental, and economical vision to provide to the suppliers. The owners of these small deposits, we call them collector partners. We provide them the service to buy the material. Please, Ale. This is our policy, free of child labor. Also, the next one. We are working very hard against the plastic oceans, pollution. And at the end, I want to say that in order to increase collaboration between sectors, Professor Yunus explains that social business are not designed to be competitive, but collaborate. There's no fight, but collaboration. Well, it's necessary to understand very well this statement and face the global challenge requires for everyone. The thing is that we need to increase trust. We have to see each other as a person. not as sectors. We have to delete all the boundaries between sectors. We have to learn how to keep with peace from the basis of that culture peace, keep in dialogue, and increase that possibilities of collaboration. If we want, this is the end. If we want no one left behind, we have to say to the governments and to the companies that if they don't have the will to embrace the human rights perspective, we have to let them behind.
Thank you. So now we're going to have, the next group is about growing environmental crisis and the myth of decoupling. And I think we have Jessie Henshaw first on the agenda, but Nick Mannion is going to go before her.
Yeah.
She has asked, I think, or you have agreed. And I have you already up. You just have to plug this back in, and hopefully you'll pop right back up there. Let's see. Hopefully.
Well, if it doesn't work, I can do it without, but let's give it
Okay.
give it 10 seconds or 20, and then if it doesn't work,
Yeah.
whatever. Just time to take something.
There, hold on. No, something's happening. There we go.
Oh, signal.
There
There you
we
go.
go.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
And the clicker,
The clicker is, where is it?
who has the clicker? Did someone take that with them? Alejandra, do you have the clicker?
Sorry.
There we go.
Nice try. And on that note, thank you for bringing some joy. That's always welcome at the start of the presentation. I'm Nick Mannion for the European Environmental Growth. It's the largest federation of environmental NGOs in Europe with 30 million members. And we are an advocacy organization. We push for more green policies, mostly in Europe, but also at the global level. Thanks, Eva, for having me on the panel. I'm going to talk about a slightly inconvenient truth. I would even say a more inconvenient truth than the one Al Gore presented like 10 years ago, which many of you will know about. And in 6 words, it's called, summarized, green growth is not good enough. I will even replace it by circular economy is not good enough. As the previous speaker presented, I found it wonderful what he's doing, and I really support that. And I have colleagues working on the circular economy, and I support them. But the dire reality is, if you look at it at the perspective of how much of the economy is circular globally at this point in time, it's about roughly 10%. And declining. Currently, it's declining. Whatever we are trying to do, we can maybe raise it again to 12 or 15%, but the vast majority of the economy can never be made circular because of the laws of thermodynamics. Because fossil fuels, once you burn them, you can't like recycle them. That's just not possible. So there are limits to the scope of the circular economy, and we have to move beyond. Now, in recent years, this concept of green economic growth, which is the expansion of the economy without an accompanying increase in environmental harm, that has gained some political momentum, and that's of course welcome. That there is more focus on green growth than on non-green growth. However, it now appears that this choice of the last 10 years is not founded on any scientific basis, because all the empirical data and even theoretical literature is both overwhelmingly clear and sobering. There is no evidence at all, according to 6 scientists who studied the matter in this new report that we are launching today, and which is already in media across the world. There is no evidence supporting the existence of decoupling, which is a term you will hear a lot from policymakers, of economic growth on the one hand and environmental pressures on the other hand, on the scale needed to address the environmental issues that we are facing. That's the conclusion of this report, which is called Decoupling Debunked Evidence and Arguments Against Green Growth as a Sole Strategy for Sustainability. Now, yesterday, those of you who were in the panel at the official plenary, we heard already a lot of speakers talking about that we're not meeting the economic growth targets. The OECD speaker started this whole speech with, of course, we have a problem, the economic growth is not what we want it to be. Even the IUCN supported it. So I was a bit struck by that focus because actually the way we see it as environmental NGOs, SDG 8, target 8.1, which calls for sustained, not even sustainable, but for sustained economic growth in all countries, also the high GDP countries, is the mole, is the Trojan horse within the whole SDG agenda. It's undermining the possibility to achieve most of the other SDGs, which are very applaudable goals. And there's a problem with that. And there are a lot of earth scientists, and Jesse is one of them, who can testify to that. There is no scientific basis to go for GDP growth, especially not in high GDP countries. Now, the authors of this report, they also explain that it not only has never happened, this absolute decoupling on a scale that's needed, there are 7 reasons according to them why, and they are still cautious, it's extremely unlikely that it will ever happen in the future, which of course, as we're talking about the future, they cannot prove or provide evidence of. And these 7 are summed up in the report and explained there. I'll just give them. Rising energy expenditures, which is, well, you first take the easy available energy sources, and now we're stuck with the less easy available ones. The rebound effects, for example, people shift to an electric car and then they start driving more. Problem shifting, underestimated impact of the service economy, limited recycling potential, I touched upon that when saying circular economy is 10%. Insufficient and inappropriate technological change. We have all kinds of technological innovations, but where's the ex-innovation, where you decide that certain damaging technologies we should better phase out, such as fracking, for example. Why do we need fracking? And cost shifting. These are 7 reasons why green growth as a strategy to achieve sustainability is bound to fail because of these 7 reasons. And so they sum it up in the report. Wow. Okay, what's that? So just as a small clarification to be clear, the fact that decoupling on its own, this without addressing the issue of economic growth, has not been and will not be sufficient to reduce environmental pressures to the extent that is required, is not a reason to oppose everyone who is going for any kind of decoupling in the literal sense of separating an economic activity and its environmental impact. Of course, the less environmental impact per economic activity, the better. But without, it's just the problem is the focus, that the belief that this is going to be getting us away from the environmental collapse that we are seeing right now. That's just very damaging, because it stops us from doing what is actually what it does. Decoupling as it is now and as being promoted in the last 10 years, it's like moving from the fast lane to hell towards the slow lane to hell, which is the ecological collapse. But we need to get off the highway, so we have to do more. So a bit of what is it then that we have to do? I have just listed a few policy options that are around there, or academics are talking about, such as the degrowth of the unwanted sectors, the well-being for all within planetary limits, such as New Zealand going for well-being budget, the donut economy from Kate Raworth. There are people, macroeconomists, ecological economists, even policymakers, MEPs, members of European Parliament, who are working on alternatives, but they need some support from civil society. Now, the connection with the whole HLPF and the SDGs, I'm almost there, is basically this. What I just said is very strongly at odds with SDG 8.1, which aims to promote sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth. So, as I said before, I think it's the mole within Agenda 2030, and that's the one that we shouldn't reach that target, because if we reach it, we won't be able to reach all the more valuable targets. It's a very bad measure of progress anyway. So, my question here at HLPF is, as we're going to have in the afternoon, the 3-hour plenary official session, where SDG 8 will be debated and progress on it will be presented, if there will be some critical notes in that meeting, if there will be governments, and there are governments like Finland, who already expressed that the way they see it when they are implementing the SDG agenda, they will not put the focus on that GDP growth target because they already know that it's quite damaging. Will there be more countries willing to give at least some way of maneuvering of critique on this target? Or is it just going to be a good news show, everybody showing off how far they've gone in achieving it? So if there's any opportunity for you to talk to delegates of members of countries here, there are copies of the report back in the room which are here for you to take and use, especially if you're meeting policymakers, to challenge them a little bit with this. It's not an easy message, but if we as NGOs don't bring it, then and the science doesn't bring it, then how are they ever going to hear about it? And I think Jesse is going to follow up on that soon. Finally, well, researchers, they have some idea about this truly sustainable way forward, and the main conclusion of the report is increasing the efficiency of production, the resource efficiency, only makes sense if it is part of a wider pursuit of sufficiency, which is the direct downscaling of the most damaging economic production sectors where it is needed most. And I hope one day we will get there. Thanks.
Thank you. I will pull yours up while you are coming.
Switching
Yep.
slides.
Switching slides.
Yeah, my slides actually come from a, which is the clicker. That's that. Oh.
There we go.
Here we are. The path to natural growth. And that sort of jumps ahead. That's the conclusion, in a way. I'm a natural systems scientist, and in the 70s I developed a real fascination with how growth transforms systems, how they go from a cell to an immature form to a mature form, and then have a long life, for example, like this, let's see, that's there it is. That a cell in the womb goes from 1 to 1 trillion in 9 months, and then we spend 20 years perfecting the organs and the relationships, and then whoops, and then have a long life. I'm not getting used to this. And that's nature's integral. That's her standard pattern of growth, and you see that in simple things like making dinner. First you have an idea, then you just take some stuff out of the fridge, then you take some more stuff out, and then you work with it, and then you put some stuff back because it wasn't what you needed, and you go through that creative process, and then at a certain point, then you switch from starting things up to finishing them up. And it's like any office project is like that too. You start with a creative process of developing something immature, and then go through a refinement process of maturing and perfecting it for its duty life. And so why this isn't part of common discussions and educations, I don't know, because it's so much a part of life. But anyway, let's see, I'm supposed to follow this too. Let's see, fascination with how systems transform as they develop, such as how our economy, once changed by small accumulating steps, like you might think of that as the 1700s, small steps and bigger and bigger and bigger. But the fact that this is an organizational growth is the root of the reason for limits to growth. That, for example, if you're walking down the sidewalk by bigger and bigger steps, at first you make a lot more progress, and then a lot more progress, and then you lose your balance and fall and have a crisis because the organization of your body can't perform beyond a certain limit of extent. And that's part of what's happening with our world growth system, is that it's pushing all of us to make bigger and bigger choices and deal with more and more complex situations and issues, and so it's producing crises. But let me see, where can I jump to? In part, we experience this as a universal pressure for increased economic performance from all people, all organizations, societies, and of course from nature. This is the investment cycle that produces this fast growth period.